Chicken's just bad from an ethical perspective, from the way it's raised, and from a health perspective. If you do these things, you will live longer and feel better and have less emotional reactivity because you're less stressed physiologically. And you need this as a superfood. There is not a way around it that I've been able to find, and I have looked.
Dave, towards the start of the new book, you share that studies are showing something that's rather fascinating and scary at the same time. The fact that our brains are lagging a third of a second behind what's actually happening in real life. So let's talk about what's happening there and what this means for us.
This is not a new phenomena. It's just more of a newly discovered phenomena. When something happens in the world around you, like let's say I clap my hands, you hear it right away. Or maybe if you remember 7th grade or something in physics, well, there's a delay for sound. So it took a tiny amount of time for the sound to get to you. But once it got to you, you heard it. But what's really happening is it gets to your body. And then a third of a second later, a little bit less if you're young, a little bit more if you're older, your brain gets the first electrical signal that something in the world is happening around it. And then a little more time to figure out that it was me clapping my hands instead of, a car driving by or something. Do you notice the third of a second lag time on reality, Jesse?
Not at all. I mean, it's happening all the time. So our total reality has that buffer, so it would be impossible to notice.
It feels like it would be, except like, look, if I do this, you should know that there was this lag between, but you don't and I don't. Nobody does. That is scary because it means someone else or something else is in charge of you for a third of a second all the time, and it doesn't even let you know it's there. It's hiding itself from you.
We're just along for the ride.
Well, that's what the neuroscience shows. So then what is that system? Well, that is the automated system of your body, something I call the MEAT operating system in my new book. The new book is called Smarter, Not Harder, because it turns out that operating system is really, really fast because it can operate in that third of a second where your brain doesn't know what the heck's going on. But it's also really dumb.
Okay, well, while people are freaked out now, I think we better get into the practical and talk about what somebody could do in that case. So we realize there's this lag. Given that we have this information now, what do we do about it? How do we go in and biohack?
So with biohacking, about 10 years ago, I opened the world's first biohacking facility underneath Arnold Schwarzenegger's office in Santa Monica. And I took all the tools that I'd found worked for me, at about $1 million worth of stuff, and I put it in a facility so that we could work with people who'd come in and say, okay, well, let's improve your biology. Let's make it happen really fast. Problem was, what's the goal? And over time, I found there's 5 goals. And by the way, Own and Upgrade Labs is the website. You can open a facility right now. There's dozens of them opening across the U.S., and it's a franchise. So anyone who qualifies can open one in their town. I want to make biohacking something that's just accessible. You don't have to go buy a bunch of stuff. You just go in and get everything done all at once. So what I learned is that people want one of 5 things, and I structured Smarter, Not Harder around teaching you how to get those 5 things with less energy. One of them is they want muscles. So, okay, that's your goal. That's different than if your goal is cardiovascular performance. You ever seen a bodybuilder run a marathon?
No.
Yeah, me either. And you don't see marathoners bodybuild because those are actually very opposite ends of a spectrum, and there isn't a lot in the middle. We can help you get cardiovascular and muscle, but if one of those is your top goal, the other one's going to be your second goal, and that's okay. But those are just 2 really common sort of gym goals. A lot of people really want what was most precious to me, and that was the ability to get my energy back. So getting energy is really important. In fact, that's way more important than the thing that comes with getting energy back, which is abs. So if weight loss is your goal, it's the same as having more energy, because if your body's putting electricity into making muffin top, it's not putting electricity into focus, energy, and feeling good. That's just how it works. So it's like a teeter-totter. So, okay, now we've got energy, we've got muscle, we've got strength. there's also brain. A lot of people, they want their brains to work better, but they don't know how to do it. So they try all sorts of stuff. Maybe you've tried some nootropics. Maybe they even work, but there's actually things you can do that make your brain work better. And that's a part of biohacking. Neurofeedback is one of the many different practices I talk about in the book. And then the final thing, and for the first time in human history, people have asked for this more than losing weight. That one is resilience, or the ability to manage stress. Because, I don't know, something happened over the last 3 years that was mostly government policy oriented that seemed to increase societal stress in a major way. I don't know, like, losing your job and, having isolation and all that. So we're more stressed than we've ever been. And people are asking for ways to deal with the anxiety and stress that they're feeling. And yeah, you could do all the medically kind of things, but you don't have to go that route. You can just teach your body to manage stress better and to be less triggered so that you're calm and in control all the time. All of these are biohacking, which is why it's so interesting to me. All of them involve getting a signal into that meat operating system to make it do what you want. It's like it's manipulating you all the time based on the idea of it's going to keep you safe and make sure you don't starve to death. And since we know it's present now, how do we manipulate it? And we do that with the very definition of biohacking. I change the environment around us and inside of us so we have full control of our own biology. And it's changed the environment around us. It's listening to what's going on in the world. It's just not listening to you very well. So that's how you do it.
And the good news for us, you've separated things into those 5 silos, which makes it easy to understand. But when we start impacting one of those using specific biohacks, generally it's going to have an impact on, multiple of those at the same time, if not all of them.
You nailed it. And it's funny because we don't really see that. But what I do in the book is I tell you, all right, if this is your top goal, and I'm actually working on a survey that'll be up on daveasprey.com soon, where we help you identify your top goal, because it's actually really hard. If I say, well, you have to pick one. Do you want the ability to manage stress, or do you want more energy, or do you want to be smarter? You're like, dang, I want them all, right? Well, you got to pick one. So there's actually statistics we're working on that lets you do that. And when we get into the book, you start saying, okay, this one is the one that appeals to me the most. And then there's a table or a chart in the book that says, if you do this, here's the returns you get on the other things. For instance, if you get more cardiovascular performance, let's say, that's probably going to improve your ability to handle stress unless you overtrain. So you get sort of a side benefit. But if your main thing is, I just need to manage stress better, it changes what you're going to do when you're trying to biohack. What I don't want people to do is what I did when I started the whole biohacking journey myself. I'll just do everything all at once. Now, I do want you to do everything all at once for your number one goal. But if you try to do everything for all the goals all at once, a couple things are going to happen. One, you are going to spend all of your time biohacking and driving around from place to place and trying to get all this stuff done. You're probably not going to enjoy your life when you do that. You're also going to have no time left over to do other things that matter in your life. So you've got to just pick one and then do everything that works for that. And when you're done, you're like, oh my God, like, look at me. I have more capacity. I have more power than I did before. What am I going to do with it? And one thing you could do is you could go play with your kids, or you could go ask for a raise. That's totally fine. Or you could do what most biohackers do, is you could say, you know what? I'm going to do that, but I'm going to take some of my newfound energy and power, and I'm going to put it into the next most important biohack. Now I'm going to make my brain go. Now I'm going to get my energy back. Now I'm going to have the body that I want. Now I'm actually going to get really strong. Now I want to get really fast. Or towards the end of the book, I talk about the peaceful, the spiritual side of things. Maybe I'm going to finally do that kind of personal development work where I'm going to learn that. And that's a different skill. And there's a couple chapters in the book on that, because likewise with these other biohacks, some practices will get you into spiritual states quickly and some take more time. And there's nothing wrong with taking your time. I want you to go at your own pace. But if your own pace is, I'm not going to get this done ever, Like I'm not getting where I want to go. Yes, the journey is important. Also, not wasting time on your journey might matter because you might want to have two journeys instead of just one. So I'm just talking about the things that are shown to work better than just meditating. And meditation is great, but just meditation with breath work in studies works faster. So maybe you should know that. And if meditation is your goal and you only have 10 minutes today, what are you going to do with it? Because I don't have 2 hours a day to meditate. I could make 2 hours a day. Everyone could, but it might come at a great cost. And what I don't want to do is have you spend your time and energy where you don't want to be spending it. And that's the concern, is just that you don't want to take away from your life, your family obligations, your kids, your parents, so you can go meditate. You should. And you must do something to manage yourself. But if you could do both, wouldn't you? That's the whole point here.
And for somebody who feels overwhelmed already with these 5 different pillars, and that's a roadblock for them, you make the point in the book that a good place to start to get the foundation is with the energy. And I would agree with that, because if you don't have energy to do all these other things, you're not going to get very far. So where I want to start with things here, well, I'll let you talk about your thoughts on that. And then I want to pivot into things that are depleting our energy, starting with foods. But share your thoughts on energy being a platform to springboard and do other things once you have that.
Well, Jesse, how did you get that knowledge? Because that's something I wish I would have known when I started this journey, was 702 hours in the gym when I'm in my early 20s trying to lose weight. I did not know to focus on my energy. When did you learn that? Because that's actually not the common way of thinking.
Well, I don't think I learned it coming into this health world. I was probably a lot like you, learning different things and applying them and kind of haphazardly building the protocols that I use today to maintain my health and well-being. But you did point out in the book, so I knew to go there because you made that point. This is a good foundation. And to me, it just makes sense, having navigated through this world over the years and gotten to where I've gotten, that if you don't have that, how are you going to get out of bed in the morning and do the exercise and do the brain training and the spiritual work and whatever we want to put out there? We need to have the energy to be able to do all that.
We do. And it's really funny. I didn't really understand this until I had chronic fatigue syndrome and fibromyalgia after I'd weighed 300 pounds. I mean, my brain was fried. I was dragging all the time. I felt like I had the accelerator held down to the floor in my car and it was going slower and slower. You can push harder, but the accelerator's not going to move anymore because you're tapped out. And this feeling of really desperation. And still, even as I was on my path to getting into that state, I'm like, all right, I'm going to go to the gym. Like, most important things, losing weight, right? And so a lot of us are still stuck on that. But would you really want to lose weight if you were going to have no energy? No. So you've got to find a path to losing weight and having enough energy, or even more than enough energy. And that's a very different world. So you're right. Energy is the place where you start. And if I could go back and tell myself when I was 19 or 20, I would have said, stop looking at abs and muscles. Those don't matter, even though you have a 46-inch waist. Focus on getting your energy back. Focus on getting your brain back. And if I had done those two things in order, I would have had plenty of energy and my body would have naturally lost the weight. And then I could have exercised for more muscles or not. As it was, I was riding sometimes 20, 30 miles a day on my Cannondale road bike when I was even in my late teens, just trying to keep the weight down. I was just doing stuff that didn't work or didn't work very well. And I don't want anyone else to go through like pretty much 702 hours is about 4 months of 8 hours a day full-time work, just, on a cardio and lifting weights, and it didn't work, and I want that time back. So I wrote a book.
Well, Dave, we all know that the diet is a foundational piece to health and well-being. And like I said before, I want to talk about this from an energy perspective, and starting off talking about it from foods that are zapping our energy. And you have a part in the book. Actually, you have quite an extensive piece of the book that's dedicated to this, starting with phytic acid. So I think this is important. We're not going to be able to cover them all. There's probably 8 or 10 in there, but let's cover a handful of these, because a lot of people think that they're consuming a healthy diet. They have that foundation. They're getting the energy they need from the food they're consuming, and they're doing a good job about it. But there are these hidden things in food that could be zapping our energy. So we'll get into phytic acid first and talk about what's going on there.
I love that you're asking about this. The idea that some foods contain things that slow you down shouldn't be new to people who are familiar with even the Bulletproof diet. I wrote that about 10 years ago, and it's helped people lose a couple million pounds of weight. And the first chapter, I'm like, hey, there's these 5 things that really make a difference in foods. And they're different levels for different people. People by now have heard of lectins. They've heard of omega-6 oils. And these are big things that are not necessarily good for you in plants. And maybe you've heard of oxalates, which are in spinach and kale. If you follow me, you certainly have seen me making fun of kale because I ate so much of it that I gave myself basically buildup of oxalic acid in my joints when I was a raw vegan. It's not good for you. But phytic acid is maybe the most nefarious, and it's one that no one's written a big book about. Since the Bulletproof diet, and that was one of 5 things I talked about, so I don't think it got the attention it needs. Phytic acid is present in grains and seeds and nuts, and it's there from the plants to keep you from using minerals that are in the plants and to steal minerals from your body. And the logic of plants goes something like this. Well, I can't run away because I have roots. Therefore, I need to stop things from eating me, especially eating my babies. Because if things eat my babies, that would be seeds, grains, and things like that. If they get eaten, my species will go extinct. So I guess I'll just put these enzyme inhibitors so that no one can use my plant-based proteins. And I'll put mineral chelators in, things like phytic acid, so no one can use my minerals. And then when animals eat very many of my babies, the animals get weak. And then they don't reproduce. So if they steal my babies, I'll steal their babies. This is literally Mother Nature at work in the operating system. This is not our conscious brains. Well, we've become very good at taking plant babies. It's called wheat. It's called soy. It's called corn. And also almonds. I mean, let's face it, nuts and seeds have the same thing, beans, legumes. And farmers know about this. Because even though cows are designed to make the enzyme that breaks down phytic acid, they can do only a certain amount of that. So can chickens, and so can birds. Actually, pigs are very terrible at it. They're like people. But what ends up happening is they're feeding so much grain to these animals that never ate grain that they hit the limit of phytic acid. So they actually add an enzyme to the food to allow the animals to eat more of it, even though the animals can naturally handle it. We don't make the enzyme to disable this. That means when you eat a plant baby in the form of a seed or a nut or a grain, unless you do something about it, it is going to steal calcium from your bones. It will take the zinc that was in your supplement and it will keep you from getting it. And when you realize this, you say, oh, well, okay, why is this a big deal? It's going to take some minerals. Don't we have lots of minerals? I eat a lot of spinach or whatever. Actually, no. The iron in spinach is only 1.7% absorbable because spinach also doesn't want to give you its iron. It doesn't want to get eaten. So we have this weird thing we've done in the US going back about 100 years where I'm going to say a deranged individual convinced us that we should eat high phytic acid foods because he recognized that they lowered testosterone. And he believed that testosterone and sexual desire was the root of all evil in humanity. So if he could just make up a food that would lower testosterone, then he would basically be the salvation of us all. The guy was a religious leader. You know what I'm talking about?
Is it Kellogg?
Kellogg. Yep. Reverend Kellogg. Yeah, there's a kind of cereal named after this guy. Cornflakes, high in phytic acid. Who would have thought? Sucking that zinc right out of you. You know who needs zinc? Your balls need zinc. Your ovaries need zinc. But it does reduce desire. It also reduces human fertility. Rice cakes, complete garbage fire of phytic acid for human digestion. Well, there's something we used to do because it turns out humans have been eating grain for about 5,000 years. And we know that it's not good for us. That's why they would give grain to the peasants or the slaves. And even back as far as Roman times when they had gladiators. Gladiators didn't choose to be gladiators. They were slaves. They were called barley men because they ate barley, because that's what they fed them, because it was the cheapest food. So you can survive on all kinds of stuff, which is a wonderful part of human metabolism. So when there's a famine, you can eat a lot of stuff that weakens you, but you can still eat it. At least you didn't starve to death. Yay. Until the good times come. But what we're doing is we're telling ourselves a story that these plant-based diets, high in phytic acid, high in grains, high in beans, high in all of these sources of phytic acid, that somehow they're healthier for us. The people telling you that are trying to sell you high margin foods that are profitable for them, that make you weak. They make your bones weak. They suck minerals out of your cells. These minerals allow you to make electricity effectively. You can do any biohack in Smarter Not Harder. You can do any kind of exercise. You can even sit and meditate. And if you don't have enough minerals, your body will not be able to respond to make you stronger. Since our food has less minerals than it used to have, we depleted our soil and we spray glyphosate on our soil that stops minerals from getting into plants. That's how it kills plants. Well, yikes. We just have less minerals in our food. And we're sucking it out with all these weird new plant-based foods that actually are peasant food for survival during famine for short periods. We're creating a society where testosterone is plummeting faster than it ever has since we've been able to measure testosterone. Young people, men and women, have testosterone levels far lower than their grandparents a couple generations ago. And it affects how we behave. So, yeah. Don't eat foods high in phytic acid. You are going to get some. For instance, chocolate has phytic acid in it. But you can eat much lower amounts of that. And if you eat more mineral-rich foods, or you do what I talk about in Smarter Not Harder, there's only 2 supplements that you really, really need to take to start. And I take 100+ supplements a day. I'm on an aggressive anti-aging regimen, and it's working. But you don't have to do that. The 2 minerals that matter most from Smarter Not Harder are, number 1, a multi-mineral supplement. And I'd say 2 of them are 2 categories, because you can't get multi-minerals and trace minerals in the same supplement. You're going to need a multi-mineral pill. It's usually 3 pills or more, because minerals are big. If it says you just need this 1 capsule a day, it's wrong. And you need trace minerals. So the macro minerals in that multi-mineral, they're the ones there's a lot of those in your body, like magnesium, like zinc. Trace minerals and ultra trace minerals, I put those in Danger Coffee, which is my new coffee brand. And you can get trace minerals in lots of different formulas. I just think that they do something magic in coffee. If you do trace minerals and macro minerals, you'll have the building blocks you need. But if you eat a bunch of phytic acid plant-based foods based on seeds and corn and grain and nuts, you probably won't be able to use your mineral supplement. And that's just how it works. The second thing you need is vitamin DAKE. D-A-K-E. Vitamin DAKE is important because fat-soluble vitamins from animals, plants don't make real vitamin A. The K2 doesn't come from plants unless you eat a lot of natto, which is a slimy soybean thing. That's gross. But unless you're eating tons of those things, you're stuck. The reason vitamin DAKE matters is that that's what drives minerals into cells and holds them there. So all I want you to do is have enough minerals to make electricity and fold proteins properly in your body. And if you do that, when you do an exercise, it'll work better. And if you don't do that, I don't care how much you work out, you won't get the results you want. I don't care how much you meditate, you won't get the results you want. The amount of human effort in your life is substantially increased when you don't have enough minerals. So let's fix that first. Let's get phytic acid out of our diets, or at least minimize it. And let's make sure there's enough minerals to overcome the amount of phytic acid we have. And this means when someone gives you some weird fake sausage-like creature that is allegedly lower in cruelty, it's not lower in cruelty. It's just lower in minerals.
All right. So minerals, vitamins. This is obviously something we need to highlight here. You're making a big emphasis on the importance, which makes sense to me, and I agree with that. But let's make it really easy for people who this is their one takeaway that they're going to apply, say, after our conversation today. You mentioned Danger Coffee when it comes to, I think you said the trace minerals. But let's get really practical with people because, when it comes to these different supplements, there's different forms of, different minerals and different vitamins. How do we eliminate all that confusion for people and tell them, even specific brands that they can take to make sure their vitamins and minerals, the fat-soluble DAIC in the minerals, trace and regular minerals, are topped up so they at least have that baseline? What would you recommend?
So let's start with trace minerals. Danger Coffee, it's mold-free as tested. It's my new coffee brand, dangercoffee.com. You're going to find that when you drink it, you feel different. The body senses minerals. It's like, oh, I don't know why I like this, but it's so good. And it feels different. So that's going to get your trace minerals. From a multi-mineral perspective, a lot of people have their favorite vitamin brands, and it's hard for me to just pick one of the many, but it's pretty straightforward. If it's a multi-mineral complex and it's 3 pills or more and it's just minerals, it's going to be good to go. We've got one at Upgrade Labs that I'm working on, but you do not have to buy supplements from me. These are the least sexy supplement categories of all. I have formulated nootropics. I help make nootropics a big industry. The things that make your brain work better. And there's formulas I have for sleep and for sex and all these kinds of things. I'm sorry, but minerals are foundational. They're not sexy. But if you don't have a foundation, who wants to build a nice house on, a pile of mud? So what I want you to do is get the strong foundation. And there's so many companies that make good supplements in the mineral range. Just pick your favorite brand you're already taking, and I promise you they're making a multi-mineral. Take that, and you're gonna like it. It's not even expensive. Like these are the things that we're all missing. It's more important than B vitamins. It's that important. They're just so boring.
Okay, let me jump in for a sec here. So when we get that multi-mineral from a quality brand that we trust, we're still not going to get the trace minerals. That's something we have to get separate.
You have to get them separate. And trace minerals, there's dozens of them. They go from trace to ultra trace even. And you would get these if you ate plants that didn't have all the protective compounds in them. What I do with Danger Coffee is we're taking ancient plants from a long time ago, like a million years ago, a long time ago. And at this point, the ionic minerals are left, and all of the plant compounds that were a problem are gone because they basically get left behind after bacterial fermentation. So this is called humic and fulvic complexes. And we get lab tested ones, and we work those into the coffee in a proprietary process that we've actually filed a patent on. And what you end up with is coffee that tastes amazingly good. You don't taste the minerals, but when it hits your tongue, your body's like, there's something in here. And it's partly electrolytes and it's partly minerals. And the reason that I do that is I want to replace minerals in my body that I know foods are taking out. And I know that when I was a raw vegan, I depleted minerals in my body to the point that I cracked a couple teeth. I was cold all the time. I got autoimmunity. This is happening to hundreds of thousands of good people who have been deceived by industrial marketing campaigns telling them to go vegan for all sorts of reasons that are not even real. And they eventually find out, like I did, when they get sick. And every time I post about this, you'll see dozens of comments from people going, yeah, it made me sick too. I tried really hard. I'm still recovering. I cannot remain silent about that. I was a devout raw vegan. It harmed me. It is harming people right now. And even if you're not a raw vegan, it will harm you. And there's all these buts. There are science-based counterpoints to each of those. So I just believe very strongly, get minerals back in your body. It has to be trace minerals. It has to be macro minerals. Do it however you need to. And if you've spent time only eating grains and beans as your source of protein, you're going to need twice as many minerals to get back. Where I am now, I have incredibly high bone density to the point that during a recent surgery on a bone, the doctor couldn't get through the bone with his normal bone saw. He's like, what is going on? Like, this bone density, are you even human? Direct quote. Yeah, I was awake during the surgery. So yeah, that kind of a thing can happen. You just have to get your minerals back. And the power, my God, the power you're capable of when you do this, it's so worth it. So dangercoffee.com for the ultra trace minerals and the trace minerals. Any vitamin supplement you like, all the brands make a multi-mineral. Pick one. They work.
Okay, let me jump in here. Somebody that has been on, say, a vegan, vegetarian diet, lots of phytic acid, lots of lectins, say their system is...
And oxalates.
And oxalates. Their system is really depleted when it comes to minerals, but they decide to switch the diet up and eliminate those hazards and introduce a good mineral and trace mineral. You mentioned how robust your bones are. How long does it take to get there?
Sadly, if they only do that, I don't know what they're going to eat in the plant kingdom, but if they don't add some at least vegetarian types of fats, it's going to be very difficult.
No, we're saying let's say they adopted a paleo diet.
Okay, got it. So as long as they're willing to eat some animal fat and some animal protein, it depends on how long they've been vegan. And there isn't a good equation for that, because when you go vegan, it damages your cell membranes by replacing stable fats with unstable omega-6 fats. The half-life of fat in the body is 2 years. So if, like me, you really reduced your cell metabolism over time on that, it's going to take you 2 years to get halfway there and 4 years to get 3/4 of the way towards replacing your membranes with ones that work better. So it could be 2 years, could be 4 years. That's just the fats. If you did what I did and you put stupid amounts of oxalic acid embedded in all of the tissues in your body by eating a lot of raw kale and raw spinach, that gives you sore joints and kidney stones. And if you're a woman, you can also get vulvodynia, where tiny razor-sharp calcium crystals get in your vulva. Ouch, is basically how I've heard that described. So depending on how much oxalic acid you have, that can actually take years to get rid of. And that is the right supplement regimen and taking enough baking soda and sodium bicarbonate. So over time, you can get rid of this. And it'll even look like tiny little bits of white grain in your pee if you were to filter your pee. It takes a while to get rid of that. It's actually harmful to you. So if you didn't eat too many of those things and all you did was deplete minerals with your raw vegan diet, including lots of soaked raw almonds and all the stuff I used to do. I make really good vegan desserts. With all of that stuff, if you just depleted your bones and your cells of minerals, just restoring minerals isn't that hard to do, as long as you have vitamin DAKE, D-A-K-N-E, and you have enough minerals present, your body will put them in pretty quickly. And this is oftentimes why when you see people realize that what they're doing isn't working, that the core belief they had, that I had, that, oh, well, I'm going to have enzymes. Of course I can absorb everything. Like, this is the best diet for me and for the planet and for animals and all that stuff. When I realized it was harming me and it was harming the planet and all of that, and I said, all right, how am I going to get back? An ounce of liver a day in the form of capsules is fine. I don't like the taste of liver. You probably don't need more than that. That's going to be helpful. Maybe for the first weeks, you take a little bit more than that, but a lot of organs aren't good for you in excess. You're going to need some red meat, and you're going to need your mineral supplements, and you're going to not eat phytic acid. And when you do that, magically, your energy turns back on really quickly. I have sat with hundreds of vegans over the years when they tried their first grass-fed steak. And it's actually an honor to be able to do that, because this is someone's willingness to question their assumptions, and to be experimental and to question their beliefs. And you sit down and it's just a universal experience. They eat it, and there's hesitation and sometimes fear and sort of this, I'm going against something that I believe, but I know it's not working. And by the end of the meal, it's kind of universal. It's like, I feel so good. Like, their eyes are glowing, like, oh my God, like, I've been missing this. Right. And after that first hesitant bite, it's like, you can tell their body's like, yes, I needed this. And I was the same way when I went back on eating meat. So sometimes people get mad because I post sort of humorous memes about my time as a vegan. Like, you're making fun of me. I'm like, no, you're just easy to trigger because you don't have enough minerals. And that's okay too.
All right. I want to clarify here. You talked about having liver. You just got into having meat as a plant-based person, and that, transition that happens within them that you've seen happen with a lot of people that you've gotten to do that with. What I want to clarify is the DAKE. If we have the liver and we're having the meat, we still need a DAKE supplement on top of that, though, correct?
You do. If you wanted to get enough vitamin K2, if you ate a substantial amount of cheese, whether it was sheep or cow, you might get enough K2. You also get some K2 in grass-fed butter. So you could do like the original Bulletproof thing, have grass-fed butter. For the first 2 years of post-vegan diet, you usually are going to just crave butter. That's your body fixing your cell membranes and getting enough K2 to fix calcium where it goes in the body. So you're going to crave the butter. But if you take vitamin Dake, the vitamin D part of Dake, you can't get it from food. There's just not enough in food. And some people believe, as I once did, that, well, I should get all of my nutrients from my diet. That's absurd, because if you believe you should get all of your nutrients from your diet, you should also get all of your toxins from Mother Nature. And we're all getting a lot more toxins than our bodies were designed to handle. So the reason you take supplements is that they overcome deficiencies in our food supply, and they overcome toxins that are in the environment around us that we put there. So getting enough K2 is critically important for that, and getting enough vitamin D is important for that. If you live at the equator and you walk around naked all the time and you eat the right diet, you might get enough vitamin D. I tried that. I wore just a loincloth. Okay, not really. I did go to Hawaii for 6 weeks in the sun every day, 2 hours a day, and measure my vitamin D levels. And it didn't work, but I did get sun damage to my skin. So there.
All right, before we leave this part, and we're going to leave, we got a lot more to get into. I want to make sure it's very practical for people. And I mentioned before how there's different forms of some of these different supplements you can take, which makes it more confusing. And certain ones are really well paired together. I think it's copper and zinc you talk about in the book, where you have to be careful of balancing those together. I know there's other ones as well where they come in pairs, and it's about balancing the ratio. So how do we know the mineral part? You've gotten into the supplement and Danger Coffee, or getting that getting the minerals that you could get in Danger Coffee from another form. But when it comes to Dake, how do we know we're getting enough? How do we know we're getting the right form and the right ratios? I'm confused, and I'm in this world basically 24/7. Help us understand how to make sure we're having this foundation properly balanced.
I'm so glad that you asked about that, because it is confusing. The hardest part of vitamin Dake is vitamin D, because we have vitamin D receptors that are determined genetically. That means if you have enough vitamin D, how easily can your body use it? Well, I have resistant genes. They use vitamin D quickly, and they resist getting it in. So for me, at my body weight, even though I have light colored skin, I need 15,000 IUs of vitamin D, but an average person might need 5,000. And some people might only need 2,000. So the best thing you can do is get a vitamin D test to see what your levels are, and then change your supplements based on that. So my vitamin D test, I think this was from the DNA company, which is a company that I advise. They said, well, Dave, you pretty much should be living on a Pacific island somewhere. Like, you have the genes of someone with brown skin for vitamin D receptors, and that's a problem for me. So I overcome it with supplements. So bottom line, test for vitamin D. If not, the rule is 1,000 IUs of vitamin D3 for every 25 pounds of body weight. But you could vary greatly from that, but that works for most people. So in the vitamin Dake that I do for Upgrade Labs, we have that. And then vitamin A needs to be preformed vitamin A from animals. I like about 10,000 IUs a day, but ranges also vary from that. Plant-based vitamin A, called beta carotene, simply doesn't convert well in the body. It doesn't count. And then vitamin K, there's 3 forms that matter. There's K1. You need a little bit of that probably. Vitamin K2 comes in 2 forms, MK4 and MK7. And for that, read the book. I talk about the differences in them. It's relatively nuanced, but anything that says K2 on it is probably going to get you close enough for government work. And then vitamin E, you want vitamin E from annatto if you can, or at least vitamin E that is full of tocotrienols, not synthetic vitamin E. Synthetic vitamin E in trace amounts as a preservative doesn't matter. If you're supplementing with it in supplement level doses, it doesn't do you any good and probably does you harm. So I talk about how to get tocopherols and tocotrienols in mixed forms in the book. And yes, the vitamin Dake that I make for Upgrade Labs has that stuff in it. But my goal here, I don't write books to sell supplements. I educate people because if someone had told me this, it would have made my life a lot easier. And that's why I'm saying, like, pick a multi-mineral supplement. Like, you don't have to get my stuff, right? What I want you to understand is that if you're missing these things, don't spend $75 on an anti-aging supplement. Like, just don't, right? And by the way, I love anti-aging supplements. I take them all the time. But you're putting your effort in the wrong place. You're putting frosting on the cake when you don't have a cake that can hold the frosting. And so I want you to have that strong core, and that comes from vitamin D, and it comes from a multi-mineral, and it comes from trace minerals. Do that first before you even go to the gym.
All right, Dave, let's move on beyond that now. And you mentioned omega-6s before. And I feel like for people, I know I've been in this boat too, there's this love-hate relationship with them because in general, people these days are getting too many of them, but they are an essential fat, so we need some of them. How do we go about navigating that and making sure we're getting the right amount in a quality fat? Yeah, how do we navigate that?
Oh, it's really easy. Don't eat seed oils because they contain chemically separated, usually, omega-6 fats, but even omega-6 fats that are expeller pressed, like expeller pressed canola oil, it's still damaged because omega-6 fats are unstable in light or heat. That's just how it works. Yes, technically your body needs omega-6 oils. Grass-fed beef has 1.6% omega-6 fat in it. You will not have a problem getting enough omega-6 fats. They're essential, but only in trace amounts. So your problem is, or your challenge is, how do I reduce my omega-6 consumption because it's everywhere? Knowing full well that if you eat animal products, you get enough omega-6s. And knowing full well that there's a case for eating a tablespoon of high-quality olive oil a day for the other benefits it has, that it also contains omega-6. And there's a case for saying if you eat 1 or 2 walnuts a day, you're getting enough omega-6 there. Or there's a case that says if you eat an avocado or half an avocado, you got plenty of omega-6s to go over and above what your body needs to be essential. So you can drop the fear of not getting enough omega-6s. The only person who would say that would be someone who's probably very deep in trauma-oriented vegan philosophy. So no, you won't starve of omega-6 fats. Not possible, given that everything you eat has omega-6 fats in it, including even grass-fed butter has small amounts, and that's enough. So how do we go about getting rid of the bad ones? Well, you just don't eat processed seed oils. And I would even say don't eat processed avocado oil, although it's better than many. You should be doing unheated olive oil, a little bit. Doesn't have to be every day. You put it on your salad, things like that. You can eat, like I said, avocados, 1 or 2 walnuts, or better yet, macadamia nuts. Cashews have the best fat ratio of any so-called nut, even though cashews are actually a legume. Soaked and sprouted is always better for nuts because they do have phytic acid, but a tablespoon of nuts, you can probably handle that if you're taking your mineral supplements. Eating pancakes made with a pound of almond flour, that's where you're going to get into trouble for it. So as long as your diet is mineral sufficient and you're eating a small amount of soaked or sprouted nuts, you're fine. And heck, I'll eat a couple walnuts. I don't care. I can handle it. But if I was eating pounds of them like I was as an always hungry vegan, that's when I was doing the real damage. So that's the trick. Substitute animal fats for plant fats whenever you can. If it's deep fried at a restaurant, don't eat it. There's 3 exceptions to that rule. You can eat tallow fries. You can eat duck fat fries because tallow and duck fat, tallow is animal fat. Those are stable. That's what all of our fried food was made in until about 1960 when the seed oil industry came in. The third example is brand new. It's called cultured oil. It's from a company called Zero Acre Farms. And they have found a way to use fermentation, to use yeast fermentation, to create a very stable monounsaturated cooking oil that is actually safe to cook in with because it doesn't damage very easily at all. And it has no flavor. It also costs half as much as canola oil. So restaurants love it. This is an oil that's going to restore a lot of the farmland in the US because we don't need corn and soybean oil for this stuff to exist. Also, I am an investor in the company since their first round. It's one of the most exciting companies on the planet right now for fixing our agricultural system. We can get higher quality oil that makes us healthier from plants if you can find a restaurant. There are now dozens of them using cultured oil. But in the rest of the time, don't eat fried stuff at restaurants unless it's fried in duck fat and tallow. And you'll know because they're going to tell you because that stuff's expensive. And a little asterisk, if it's fried in coconut or palm, a few restaurants do that. Those are okay. Otherwise, just don't do that. Don't eat salad dressings. Don't eat processed foods. And magically, your skin will look better. Your testosterone levels will go up. Your cell membranes will start to heal, and you'll like your life. And French fries just aren't worth it. If you're thinking about it, you could eat the French fries. You could have 3 shots of Jack Daniels, or you could smoke a cigarette, and each of them is going to do about the same harm. I promise you, the cigarette and the Jack Daniels feel better than the French fries.
All right. Well, thank you for breaking all that down. I want to move into the other end of the spectrum on the omegas, the omega-3s. And you talk about something controversial in the book. Well, more than one thing. But the fact that fish may not be, well, you're saying it's not the health food everybody's saying it is. So talk about why this is the case.
When I wrote the Bulletproof Diet, I definitely recommended fish, and I've eaten a good amount of fish. But the problems are increasing, and they have been over the past 10 years very dramatically. And mercury was always a problem in fish. So I recommend the low mercury fish, things like sockeye salmon. And I still do it to a certain point because you need omega-3s, and omega-3s from fish are really good for you. Problem is microplastics have become a major, major issue in the world. So every time you eat a plant, magically, let's say that again. So every time you eat a fish, magically you are eating plastic. And that plastic got there because we put it in the environment. The microplastic beads in your facial scrub, even the fleece you're wearing right now, is a major contributor to tiny plastic particles that get into your cell membranes. They're even getting into plants. They're getting into our ecosystem. They don't break down. So unfortunately, fish has become so polluted that it's hard to say you should be a pescatarian. In fact, you will get sick as a pescatarian now, but you might not have gotten sick 20 years ago. Because to get enough protein from fish, you're going to be consuming a large amount of endocrine disruptors, a large amount of metals, and a large amount of plastic. So fish once or twice a week for the beneficial fats, fine. Fish as a primary protein source, not going to work anymore.
Okay, so given that, to make sure we're getting enough omega-3s for people that were relying on that as their source, you mentioned you can still do it a couple times a week, but what would you recommend to make up for that? Is it a certain supplement that's been filtered and tested, or how do we make sure we're getting enough omega-3s?
Well, there's 2 kinds of omega-3s that we're talking about in that conversation, and I should be super clear on that. One of them is called EPA, and the other one's called DHA. And these are the really precious ones that only really come from animals. There's an algae-based source for DHA that we can get now. But EPA is what adults need more of. It helps our brains work better. DHA is what babies and kids need more of. Now, adults need EPA and DHA. Kids just need more DHA and less EPA. So if you eat some fish, traditionally you would get this. So the biggest and best source has always been fish eggs. So tribes in all of the tribes we know about where they had fish, they would save and dry the fish eggs and give them to pregnant women because these were basically how they made sure their children would be healthier. And even during times of war, they would still trade eggs from the people who live by the ocean with the ones that, because yeah, we're fighting now, but we'll probably interbreed 5 generations from now. So here's some salmon eggs, like that kind of a thinking. So you can't get fish egg oil, and that's a clean source. And you can get molecularly distilled oil from fish as long as it doesn't taste fishy. There is a quality problem with fish oil right now. You go to a bulk store and you buy the cheap fish oil, it's probably going to be worse for you than not taking fish oil. So that's the conundrum. You want high quality fish oil that doesn't smell fishy, doesn't give you fish oil burps. That's a problem. So a high quality one, you're going to get clearer skin, clearer eyes. You're going to feel better and have a reduction in inflammation. There is no argument for mega dosing fish oils that I can find. That fish oils are also unstable. You need a little bit of those. But if you do what I used to do when I was trying to figure this out, is you take like 3 glugs out of the bottle of clean fish oil. That's probably too much unless you just had a recent brain injury or there's a specific use case for short period high dose. Otherwise, it's a couple grams a day.
Okay. Coming back to the fish, you mentioned the microplastics and you mentioned the heavy metals. For somebody that's been relying on fish as a source of omega-3s, a source of protein, and now they're thinking to themselves, oh, I probably have a lot of these contaminants built up in my body. What can we do at that point to detox now that we're aware and we're making different choices? But because of the choices of the past, how do we detox that out of our system?
That's a challenge. I had heavy amounts of lead, mercury, moderate amounts of cadmium, and thallium, which is another less known toxic metal that comes from eating lots of kale. It concentrates in kale because we replace lead in gasoline with thallium that is much more toxic. So I had to go through this detox process myself in my late 20s. In order to get rid of those, you want to know which ones you have. If you've been eating a lot of fish, you almost certainly have mercury, you probably have lead, and may have cadmium. I would suggest working with a functional medicine doctor to get a picture of what's in there to know whether what you're doing to get rid of it works. The way we get rid of those heavy metals is similar to the way plants steal good metals from us. It's called chelation. And you use a variety of compounds that you take orally or intravenously or sometimes rectally. And these preferentially stick to mercury and they stick to lead so that you can then pee it out or poop it out. You also upregulate the detox systems in your liver and your kidneys with a variety of compounds. You can also take binders like activated charcoal or chlorella. But doing them in the right order is important because you could do what I did when I first started trying to deal with this myself before I realized that there were doctors who specialize in heavy metals. I just said, well, I'll take a bunch of that stuff. And if you free up heavy metals in your body and you can't excrete them, they recirculate, do more damage, and they stick in your brain. If you lose a ton of weight quickly, your body stores toxins, including metals, in your extra fat. So if you're a chubby pescatarian and you suddenly say, I'm going to learn how to lose weight really quickly, you're going to free up a ton of lead and mercury that's in your body, and it's probably going to give you brain fog. So as you're losing the weight, you take toxin binders and you take glutathione and things like that. So the short answer is, if you've been on a pescatarian diet and you accumulated heavy metals and PCBs as a result, you're going to want to see a doctor who specializes in that. If you're going to stay pescatarian, you want to make sure that when you eat fish, you take chlorella, which is a supplement made out of algae that sticks to mercury so that your body won't absorb it from the fish. That's what I do when I eat fish now. I take 20 or 30 little tiny green chlorella tablets, and I notice a difference the next day. Years ago, when I had a very advanced yoga practice, I would notice if I had sushi with tuna's high in mercury, the next day I couldn't stand on one leg and balance with my eyes closed. I would just fall over. But if I didn't have sushi, I could stand and I wouldn't fall over. I was like, oh, wow, my daily balance is different based on this small amount of neurotoxin. So yeah, you can bind it. It's just work. And it's okay. No one's perfect. This isn't an alarm situation. I was doing something that I thought was good for me. Maybe I thought it was good for the planet, or I thought fish didn't matter as much as chickens in the overall hierarchy of life. Maybe it's not working.
Well, speaking of chickens, you're not too big a fan of those when it comes to a protein source. Talk about why that is.
Well, part of what I learned in my travel around the world, really learning different spiritual practices, deaths per calorie is a thing. And if you care about all life, you have to look at how many creatures died for you to eat what you're eating, whether it contains creatures or not. And I can eat a whole chicken in one sitting because I'm 6'4", 200 pounds, and I need about 150 to 200 grams of protein a day. That's going to be a chicken and a half. So you want to eat a chicken, huh? What's the chicken going to do to you? How many animals did you kill to eat the chicken? And how many animals died for the chicken to eat? You got to look at all of those in that bite of wings and go, wow, this chicken wing probably wasn't worth it in a deaths per calorie. But okay, you're like, Dave, shut up. I don't care about that. I just eat animals and it doesn't matter. Okay. Let's talk about what's in chicken. Chicken is a good source of protein. Problem is, it's also a source of advanced glycation end products. These are cross-linked proteins that are inflammatory and aging. It's also a large source of, yes, you guessed it, a large source of omega-6 fatty acids. Even the kind of chickens that I raise on my organic regenerative farm, we don't feed them corn and soy and those sorts of things, and they get a lot of meat because they get to go out. Chickens love meat. They get to go out and find bugs. So what happens with that fat? It's slightly higher in saturated, but still full of omega-6. So chickens aren't very compatible with us. They're the wrong species. Wrong fats, decent protein, too much advanced glycation end products, and the deaths per calorie on chickens is atrocious, especially industrial chickens, where all of the grains they're fed are from sterilized land where hundreds of thousands of creatures were killed so that the grain could grow there. And when the tractors come through to cut the grain, there's a cloud of birds following the tractor to pick up all the chopped up lives of cute little animals like moles and mice and bunnies and turtles and salamanders and snakes and things like that. Chicken's just bad from an ethical perspective, from the way it's raised, and from a health perspective. But would I eat chicken before I would eat a fake burger? Bring on the wings.
Well, let's talk about a breakdown then. Somebody who is aware of, different types of meat and the health benefits and the death toll and the whole array. If we were to open your deep freezer, what proportion of different kinds of meat will we find in there?
You're going to find 3 different kinds of meat, plus a few little bonus kinds. So the very best are bison and buffalo. They're just hard to get. Right. So I'm going to put those at the very top in terms of deaths per calorie and in terms of best for us. Right after that is grass-fed beef. So grass-fed beef is really the sweet spot. You can get grass-fed beef ground very affordably. After that, you're going to find grass-fed lamb. After that, you're going to find some pastured, organically fed, without corn and soy pork. It's hard to find good pork. And the reason that it's hard to find good pork is when you feed pork omega-6 fats, it accumulates those the same way we do because pig metabolisms and human metabolisms are pretty similar. They also accumulate toxins better than us. So pork is kind of a risky one and the least preferential. And that's kind of where my fridge stops. So it's the ruminant animals that are most important. And it's funny, those are the animals that are best for us biologically, and it's the lowest deaths per calorie of any food, including tofu. Like, what? Well, as a guy who, let's see, last year we had 3 cows, 25 sheep, and 25 pigs on my regenerative farm where we're building soil every year. If you eat a pound of beef every day, you're killing about 0.3 to 0.5 animals per year, unless the cow stepped on a frog or something. There was no other kills. And if you eat a pound of industrial beef, well, I don't know exactly how much food it ate, and calculating the deaths per calorie from corn and soy feed, it's enormous, but it's hard to do. And also there's usually glyphosate sprayed on that soil, which makes the animal unfit for human consumption anyway. Glyphosate steals minerals from the soil, steals minerals from the cows, and it accumulates in the cow's collagen. And when that happens, you don't want to eat it. It disrupts our gut bacteria and the collagen systems in our body. So really, my fridge is full of that. But if you're saying, Dave, shut up, I can't afford grass-fed beef, I'm going to suggest that you can, because for about $6, you can get a pound of grass-fed meat in a burger, and then you throw it on a grill or in a frying pan. $6. You would spend that at Taco Bell for lunch. I really think you can afford it. But let's say you really can't. You're on, say, food stamps, and you're really, really going, I want to be healthy, this isn't fair. Your best bet actually is industrial meat. You can go to Walmart or another big grocer, and they have 10-pound tubes of ground meat that are quite affordable. That and eggs, those are your best sources of fat and your best sources of protein right now. And there is a war on egg production in the US. Egg prices are going through the roof. It's almost like they want you to eat peasant food. There have been hundreds of fires at egg producing plants across the country that no one can explain. When they plot them over time, it's almost like it's contagious. It goes from this town to this town to this town to this town, where people are destroying egg facilities. I don't know if it's animal rights terrorists. I don't know if it's big food companies trying to make you eat fake stuff. There's bad stuff afoot there, but you can still get eggs. If not, the best thing you can do if you have a backyard, which not everyone does, get chickens. They're cheap and they eat all of your table scraps and turn them into healthy eggs. It's amazing. You don't have to eat the chickens. Just pet the chickens and eat the eggs. It's super convenient. It's really easy. Just don't get a rooster. They're noisy and they're mean.
All right, Dave, sticking with our theme here, top foods we want to avoid, histamines. And this one can be really tricky because fermented foods, people that have been tuning into the show for a long period of time know that they come up, regularly and touted as being very healthy. Plus, even if we're eating quality foods like you're talking about there, our grass-fed beef and quality meats, if we're leaving it in the fridge overnight and having that as leftovers the next day, that can be a problem there as well. So let's talk about histamines and why this is something that we need to be aware of and make better decisions if it's affecting us in a negative way.
I'm so happy that you brought this up, Jesse. A lot of people who want to chat about food kind of miss this part. So everyone's heard of histamines, right? Because, antihistamines are what you take if you have an allergy, like Benadryl. Well, histamines are more complex than that because they're formed by bacteria fermenting proteins in food. So very high histamine foods include soy sauce, which is fermented high protein soy. And tofu can be high in histamine. Fish sauce is the highest histamine food we eat. And if you have great onboard abilities to break down histamine and you don't have any allergies going on, you can eat a bunch of soy sauce and there's no problem here. But a lot of people eat foods like leftovers, especially protein-based leftovers, and then after they have the food, they get food cravings or they get really tired. You might have heard of people talk about a pork coma. Like, I ate the pork and I was so tired. What's going on there is that pork is also a higher histamine food because of its amino acid ratios when it just sits in the fridge. It's not spoiled. It's just starting like on the very beginnings of that. Histamine is recognized as a food toxin by the FDA, and a very high histamine food can actually kill you. Since I am histamine sensitive, I notice that if I eat even fresh grass-fed beef, like ground beef, that's been sitting in the fridge for 3 or 4 days before I cook it, I'll eat it and I'll start getting a cough or I'll get heartburn from it that I don't get if I cook it when it's fresh. The reason I'm histamine sensitive is that I lived in a house with toxic mold for a long time. And a lot of people who got COVID, whether or not they also were forced to inject anything or not, they're also getting higher histamine sensitivity than ever before. So what that means is that that's weird. I know I can eat hamburger, but then sometimes you feel bad when you eat it, sometimes you don't. It has to do with the freshness of the food. And fermented foods, they're not good or bad for you. Generally speaking, if it fermented with bacteria that don't make histamine, it was probably good for you. If they were fermented with bacteria that make histamine and you have a problem with it, that one brand of kombucha may knock you on your butt. Or maybe that sauerkraut, that batch, it's just not okay. And every time you eat it, you get tired and you want sugar. It's histamine that's causing that. So I talk about this in the book as like, it's a fact of life. There's always going to be some histamine out there. Your body has an onboard ability to do it. But if you're like a lot of us who went through the last couple of years, your ability to handle higher histamine levels in food goes down. So you feel like crap and you're hungry all the time. It's because that fermented food wasn't fermented the way that works for you. So I'm a huge fan of fermented food only if you feel good when you eat it.
And if you're somebody that is having fermented food, say you're eating at a friend's house and you're not sure the source, or you're not sure if they're serving meat that's been sitting in the fridge for a couple of days, you mentioned that example and how it would affect you. There is an enzyme, I believe, called DAO, a supplement that you can take with those foods if you're possibly going to be sensitive. Can you talk about that and if that's something you're using?
I love it that you know about this and you're sharing this information, Jesse. It's awesome. The enzyme your body is supposed to make in your liver is called DAO, or diamine oxidase, and that's what breaks up histamine. Get it? Histamine, diamine oxidase. So this is what breaks it down. And some of us make more of it than others, and some of us are just more sensitive with our histamine receptors. So yes, if I'm at a party or I'm eating food where I just don't know how fresh it is, or if I know I'm eating leftovers, I will take DAO, but I do something a little extra. I usually have a Benadryl on me. Benadryl will make you really sleepy if you take a whole one. But if you eat some food and you're like, oh, I got weird heartburn from that, that heartburn actually isn't from stomach acid. That heartburn right after you eat it, that's from histamine hitting your esophagus. So what you do then is you take a quarter, just a tiny, break off a little tiny bit of a Benadryl, and you kind of chew it up. It tastes all a little spicy, and then you swallow it, and magically you don't get the symptoms from the food. You take all the Benadryl, you'll go take a nap. So you can actually do that if you're having problems with some foods. The first thing to do is start coughing, your eyes will water, your nose will water, or you'll sneeze after you eat it. That's a sign you got histamine in the food and you were sensitive to it. And then you can hit it right then and you'll be perfectly fine. If you wait a while, you're just going to feel like a zombie. You're going to want dessert. You're going to want espresso. And you're going to try and prop yourself up as the histamine is pushing things down.
Dave, earlier you touched on mycotoxins and your history there with those. And I know from your case specifically, it was an environmental thing. And I want to talk about it from two different aspects. It's going to fit into our conversation here on foods to avoid. So I want to talk about food perspective. What are the common foods to be on the lookout for that could contain mycotoxins? And then in the environment, for somebody that wants to, do a scan, say, throughout their house and make sure they're not being exposed, how do they do that thoroughly? And is it just like looking around in corners of the rooms and looking for black mold that you can visibly see? Or how specific and deep do we have to get into this?
Well, There's three types of mold to really pay attention to. One of them is you could have a fungal infection in your body. A lot of people live in moldy environments like I did. We get mold in our sinuses or elsewhere. That's a doctor issue, but if you just aren't getting better, you got to look at that. Then we get mold or mold toxins in our food. And grains are a major source. Peanuts are the worst of all. And coffee and beer and chocolate are also major sources of OTA, which is a type of mycotoxin that's really bad for people. This is why Danger Coffee is lab tested with my current standards. Right on the label, it says mold tested. Check whether the brand you're using now still talks about mold on it or not. And what you're going to find is that if coffee makes you feel jittery and shaky, but not always, it's because the coffee has mold in it. The US has no laws that specify how much mold is allowed. So when Japan, China, and Europe reject coffee as too moldy, they send it here, we drink it, and then we get shaky, jittery, angry, and want sugar in it. And so I would like to see better regulations in the US on coffee. In the meantime, I'll drink my Danger Coffee, thanks. But that leaves out the environmental toxins, which are worse than food toxins for humans. And the reason is that you absorb it through your skin and through your lungs. Those are very effective delivery mechanisms for these tiny little mold toxins called mycotoxins. Penicillin is an example. A tiny little pill completely changes everything. That's how powerful they are. But the mold itself is also an irritant and an allergy causer. So if your house was in a hurricane and had a roof leak, if there was a water intrusion from a leaking dishwasher, which happened in a house that I lived in Palo Alto once, you're not going to see it necessarily, but it can have profound effects on your family in different ways. As a gift, you can go to moldymovie.com. There's a 1-hour documentary. I spent months making it. It's completely free, moldymovie.com. I interview a dozen doctors and a dozen people like you and me who just got taken out by mold in a house. And when I say taken out, brain fog, physical symptoms, things that don't make any sense whatsoever, just trying to figure out what it is. It's that big of a deal. What you can do in your house is if you know there's a history of water, you want to get a proper mold inspection. I just interviewed Brian from YesWeInspect.com on my show. My show is called The Human Upgrade, where we talk about it. And you can do an air test, which is good. Gotmold.com has an air test, but an air test alone, I don't think is enough. because even the house I'm in now, if I test the air, it's relatively decent. I have air filters, but even if I turn those off, it's decent. But it turns out there is water damage here. And the water damage, if you look at the baseboards with a flashlight shining down, like Brian showed me, you can see that they're bubbled out. So if you have anywhere inside your house with bubbled paint or discolored ceilings, you have a mold problem. And you might say, but I feel fine. Yeah, let's look at your labs. Or you feel fine, but your spouse is having weird dreams at night and getting nosebleeds or frequent bruising, or your kids are having behavioral problems. These are all signs of toxic mold. At a minimum, what I recommend doing is having air filters in your house. And I do treat my house with Home Biotic. And this is a company I founded, so maybe I have a financial interest in you spending $20 on a product. It's not going to change my life, I promise you. I made Home Biotic because it's a bacteria that competes with mold in soil, and it's missing from our homes. So if you miss that stuff around and there's condensation or other forms of water, then you've created a balance, a healthy biome around you, the kind you would have had if you lived outside. And I missed my house with that on a regular basis. So even though there's water damage that I'm getting fixed in this house, even though I'm mold sensitive, I've had zero symptoms. But if I turn off my air filters and I hadn't treated my house the way I've treated it, I think I would be not doing as well. But I did grow up in a basement with toxic mold, and it affected my behavior. Toxic mold will give you strep throat a lot, especially for kids. Strep throat gives you something called PANDAS, which is when your immune system makes a response to chronic strep throat that affects your neurotransmitters, and it gives you OCD and ODD. I had that as a kid. My behavior file was like 2 inches thick, and I was quite a little jerk. It wasn't my fault. It was the mold. It was the bacteria. It was my meat operating system just doing its best to keep me alive. I want every listener here to understand, if you're eating a lot of mold, or worse, you're living in it, you are taking years off your life, and you are going to be more emotionally reactive than you want to be. It's part of my mission around upgrading humanity. We've got to understand mold's part of the world. We're never going to get rid of it, but we don't have to have the mean ones in our homes. We can do better.
So coming back to your story, you mentioned the mental health symptoms when you were affected by the mold. What did you do specifically to get that out of your body? And did you notice when you did, like right away, your mental health came back, or how did that transition to where you are today?
It wasn't a right away thing. And I'm like the worst case scenario because I did weigh 300 pounds, because I got a lot of autoimmunity, and because I grew up in a moldy bedroom since I was 5 years old. I was in a basement that had been flooded, but we didn't know. And this was the 80s. Who the heck knows what was going on in the 80s? I also had squeezed margarine instead of butter because it was supposed to be healthier. Like I was kind of punched in the face by the big food industry over and over as a kid. So I'm enjoying getting even now. We'll put it that way, just by speaking what works. So how do I get rid of it? It turns out when you go on a high saturated fat diet, I don't know, maybe like putting butter in coffee or something like that, what it does is it helps to increase the turnover of fat in the body. Mold toxins dissolve into the fat in your body. Every cell in your body is surrounded by fat. So what you do is you go on a higher fat diet, and you take things that allow your body to bind to the fats you excrete, things like activated charcoal. And a binding protocol like that over time, it's sort of like flushing water. Like imagine you have a beaker and you put 3 drops of blue food coloring and all the water in it. You can pour more water in there, it'll dilute it. And if you keep pouring water in until some overflows, eventually you've washed away all the toxins. You do that. So step 1, get them out of your house. Step 2, get them out of your diet. Step 3, if you have a fungal infection in your sinuses, which I had, you treat that. And then step 4, continuously eat good fats and continuously bind the toxins. And when you do a protocol like that, usually with a doctor, you get better. And if you follow me on social media, I'm Dave.Asprey on Instagram, or if you subscribe to my newsletter, I talk about these 3 detox pathways. I believe they're also in Smarter, Not Harder, which is the newest book. In order, this is what you do for all environmental toxins. I don't care if you have mold. If you do these things, you will live longer and feel better and have less emotional reactivity because you're less stressed physiologically. It's 3 Gs. It's glutathione, it's glucarate, calcium D-glucarate, and it's glycine or collagen, because glycine is the most common amino acid in collagen. Those 3 things in order get rid of most mold toxins and most environmental toxins. Glutathione is the biggest detox pathway in the liver. It's also an antioxidant in your cells. Glucuronidation gets rid of PCBs. It gets rid of excess estrogen and a lot of the other endocrine disruptors. And then glycine gets rid of some of the other toxins, especially in mold. So if you just upregulate those three things, you can have more toxins than Mother Nature wants you to have, and you'll still be fine.
Dave, throughout our conversation, Danger Coffee has come up a number of times. And I'm just curious, as somebody who's been touting the health benefits of Bulletproof Coffee for so many years, and you built a big brand around Bulletproof, talk about the pivot from Bulletproof now to Danger Coffee. What was the catalyst for that?
Oh, sure. So, I mean, Bulletproof's like my baby, right? I absolutely understand what I've done with that company in terms of changing our language, changing our nutritional philosophy. It made collagen into $1 billion business, and it made MCT oil into $1 billion business. And these were not industry categories. Even functional coffee is probably $500 million industry, I would guess right now. And what Bulletproof Coffee is bulletproof beans blended with brain octane oil, which is a specific kind of MCT oil that I created for Bulletproof, and grass-fed butter. And when you do that, it creates a lot of mental effects. And since I've opened Upgrade Labs, which is my new franchise, I needed to have a functional coffee in there. And Bulletproof has its own destiny. I'm still a major shareholder in Bulletproof, and I'm its biggest fanboy. I just needed something different that could be a part of Upgrade Labs. And I've also focused a lot lately on this mineral problem. And Danger Coffee solves a problem that a lot of people don't know they have, but they feel different when they drink it. And it's a different problem than Bulletproof Coffee. Bulletproof Coffee is going to give you those fats. It's going to give you the energy. You don't care about food. Danger Coffee is going to give you the minerals that you are lacking. And it gives you electrolytes when you drink it. And you can drink it black and you feel amazing. And you can put brain octane oil in it. I do all the time, right? You can put grass-fed butter in it. You don't have to do those. And it's a different thing. One of them is giving you your energy. The other one's giving you your minerals. And I'll always be a fan of Bulletproof. And I use a lot of Bulletproof products to this day. I'm not on the board anymore. But I am a shareholder, so I don't have any control or visibility into what the company does. I have full control over Danger Coffee, and I check my lab tests, and I'm adding these minerals in a way that my body really likes.
Cool. I haven't heard you talk publicly about it, so I'm glad we understand where that all pivoted and where you're at now.
Yeah, I'm a huge Bulletproof fanboy. It's just I've moved on to Upgrade Labs, and for listeners, you can go to ownandupgradelabs.com. You could open a franchise with a biohacking facility that has all the stuff from Smarter, Not Harder in it. And one of the things you can have is you can have a functional coffee bar with Danger Coffee, and you'll find it works well. But it's just very different from Bulletproof, so they're not meant to be competitive.
All right, Dave, a lot of big changes. We've been having these conversations now for years. We just got into the coffee piece. You got this whole other company. I think our last conversation, you talked about it. And then in our last conversation too, you quickly talked about a move from Vancouver Island down to Texas. So let's talk about this other big move. What facilitated you going, to another country? And that's a big move. What facilitated that? And how do you feel being in the new location?
I've been talking for a long time about the benefits of sunshine and vitamin D. One thing that Canada lacks is sunshine. So where I live on Vancouver Island is one of the most beautiful places on earth, according to a lot of people, not just me. But it's only beautiful for 4 months out of the year. The rest of the time, it's dark at 4:30 and it constantly rains, and you might not see the sun for 2 weeks straight. After 12 years of being up there, I just realized that wasn't what my body wants, given my vitamin D receptors. I grew up in a desert in Albuquerque, and I just miss sunshine. So I moved to Austin, Texas, where there's a lot of sunshine. The other thing that I had on my farm is I had sheep. I had a lot of sheep, but I had no community because it's a rural area with a farm. So I just needed to be around vibrant people, good community, and sunshine, availability of good food that I didn't have to grow myself, which is how it was on the island. There wasn't a lot of food that you could buy that you wanted to eat. And also, I'm single, so it seemed like a good place to hang out with people. I got consciously uncoupled about 1.5 years ago in a really mutually beneficial process with my former wife. So we're still good friends and co-parents and all, but this was the right place to be.
Got it. And do you feel, I know it's been, I think, a few months now since you've been in the new location. Do you feel mentally, physically, like your body's already adapting and you're feeling better because of that?
Oh yeah, it's been hugely regenerative for me. Just being able to look out, I am right now out the window, I can see blue sky. And where I was living for so long, I never saw blue skies. If I was there for a month, there might be a month where I'd see it for 5 minutes. And I had all the lights in the house. I have a circadian lighting company that I started called True Light, right? And it helps. It helps a lot. But there's nothing like just going outside and just looking up and breathing some clean air and seeing the sky and feeling the sun on your skin. I just need a little more of that than I was getting that far north. I do miss, Canadian people are really nice, except for the government. There's also abundant water and abundant wild food and nature, and Canada has gold and oil. Like it's got a strong reason for being up there. But for me, man, just give me some sunshine and some desert and pickup trucks full of guns. I guess that's in my Texas future.
Well, Dave, a lot of new beginnings for you. You seem like you're in a really good place, and I'm happy for you. And I know we got to part ways here, but we're going to end on this. So we've talked about coming back to all the minerals we want to make sure we're getting. We've gotten into a lot of the top foods we want to avoid. Let's go to the other end of the spectrum now and talk about some specific foods you'd make sure people are including to be part of a healthy protocol to make sure they're living their best life.
Good deal. So there's the whole list in Smarter Not Harder. And I just want to be clear, this isn't a diet book. Like this is here's the hacks that put on muscle or cardiovascular or mental wellness and brain function in very small amounts of time. So that's why you read Smarter Not Harder. But I do talk about a few foods that are just abundantly important. And one of them is animal protein. We talked about it a little bit, but if I was to go back and say, well, what did I miss in the Bulletproof diet? And that is a diet that has really stood the test of time. Carnivore is morphing to something that looks an awful lot like the Bulletproof diet right now. And in fact, I told them they would when they tried to eat only meat. So I'm like, all right, I'm going to say that's like 90% accurate even now. But with protein, number one, not all proteins are the same, just like not all calories are the same. So plant-based protein is less absorbable than animal-based protein. You need twice as much plant-based protein. So if 30 grams of beef would have worked, you need 60 grams of brown rice, whatever, in order to be functionally equivalent because of what plants do to keep you from using it. That said, most of us think about percentage of calories from fat, percentage of calories from protein. Well, it turns out you need to have enough protein and then look at percentages. So you need somewhere between 30 and 50 grams of protein from animals in a meal. And it's not about percentage. So if you have a small meal, it's going to be mostly protein. If you have a large meal, it's going to have a good amount of fat and some carbs and some protein. But you need to be protein centric when you're looking at muscle mass, and you need to be quality fat centric when you're looking at detox and energy. So I would say animal-based proteins, it's very important right now that we understand they absorb differently and they work better than plant-based proteins. And there's $1 billion probably being spent every month at this point from big companies trying to tell you that gluten, which is a plant-based protein, is functionally the same as a grass-fed steak. It is a lie. So I want people to understand eating red meat is one of the things that will keep you younger, make you stronger, and give you more energy in life. And it is actually ethical. It's good for the environment because those animals help to build soil, and you need this as a superfood. There is not a way around it that I've been able to find, and I have looked.
And I would argue too, when it comes to meat, there's probably a lot going on in there that we don't even understand. And we probably within our lifetimes won't even understand. Just like getting sunlight, you can take the isolated components of meat and try and give that to yourself in a supplement form, or you can take, vitamin D3 from the sun. But if you go back to the source of these things, they're way more complex than we're going to ever understand. And it's always better to go to the source And we know we've evolved as omnivores. So there's probably a lot going on in the meat that, again, is helpful for us. So I'm agreeing with you.
Yeah, there's something in there. And if you're listening to this and it's triggering for you, if you identify as someone who's constantly improving your health by being curious, it won't be triggering. And if you're someone who identifies as, I am a member of this tribe, I have been the raw vegan tribe, I've been the, you have to eat, paleo or keto or whatever, don't be tribal that way. Just, I eat in a way that constantly evolves, that gives me the most energy, which means you have to try other things. And when you try the things we talked about on the show, you're probably going to feel very different. And then your identity can be, I'm someone who feels different and better every day, regardless of what works for me right now. And that might be a more functional approach to the rest of your life than saying, I can only eat this and I can never eat that. It doesn't work very well. Except for French fries, don't eat those.
Unless they're tallow, right?
There you go. There's always an exception. Good call.
Dave, always enjoy our conversations. I loved the new book. I always enjoy your writing. And I'm just, again, happy for you with all the new beginnings and where you're at right now. And I just want to thank you for coming back on the show. This has been great. Thank you.
Oh, thanks, Jesse. You have a great interviewing style, a great show. Always happy to come back on.
All right. We'll do it again sometime. Thank you.
Smarter Not Harder is the book. Appreciate you picking it up. It's worth your time.
We're going to link it up in the show notes. We're going to link up your social media. You mentioned your Instagram before. We're going to link up your website, everything people can find over in the show notes. And thank you again. Now that you're done my chat with Dave, you're going to want to stick around here and catch my conversation with Dr. Lee, where you're going to learn even more foods you want to avoid to stay healthy. I'll see you over there.
So while it's very important to know how to choose the right foods, it's equally important to know what foods we want to be cautious of, wary.